Thank you for asking me to give a presentation about the Finnish MSP and especially the value of the coastal zone in Finnish MSP, I'd say. I will give you a bunch of examples how we did a collaboration process, MSP collaboration process here in Finland, how it addressed the value of coastal zone. First, I want to highlight a few things that are very characteristic to Finland and Finnish MSP. We plan from the shoreline. This is very important thing to say. And then it has to be noted that our shoreline is very long. And if you include all islands, it reaches up almost to 50,000 kilometers. So it means that we have a huge archipelago. It includes some 95 islands and islets. And a total of 2.5% of Finns actually live year-round in those islands. And we have some 63,000 holiday homes in those islands too. So it's kind of obvious that MSP in Finland has to take note on land-sea interactions, as it is stated in the MSP directive in 2014, or integrated coastal zone management. And as I saw that you like to talk about that issue, we think that these two kind of go hand in hand, land-sea interaction and ICZM. So there is a need for a holistic approach that takes note on sustainability, whether it's ecological, cultural, social, economic, or even political sustainability. So another thing is that we have very diverse water ownership structure, and the management authorities and actions are dependent on those. For example, Metsähallitus, the state-owned enterprise, is very important stakeholder, or I could say it's a collaboration partner for us during the whole planning process. And then there's something called everyman rights. This is very typical to Finland, but also you might know that is also typical for other Nordic countries. And these everyman rights, they cover not only land, but also the waters and privately owned waters, state-owned or waters. And this includes also the conservation areas. So it means that everyone has a right to kind of roam, to swim, dive, and even ice fish or angle in another one's property. And what is important is that one can also carry out tourism activities, such as you can take your tourists and watch seagulls in the sea area without permission of the water area owner. And this is one reason we consider also recreational aspects and tourism in our maritime spatial planning. And then I would like to highlight that our marine nature is very vulnerable to any changes. We have very shallow waters, we have low salinity, and we have internationally unique land uplift coast. So the human pressure is a key thing, and we have to carefully consider the effects of, for example, climate change, ponder how to protect the refugee areas, for example. And lastly, I want to mention a long winter period. How sea areas used, it differs whether it's summertime or whether it's winter time. And sea freezes over throughout the entire planning area in the Gulf of Finland, at least in some winters, and it covers more than half of our sea areas. So whether it's fishing or fish farming or maritime logistics or even wind farming, we have to consider not only the spatial things, but also the temporal things in MSP. So about the authority and organizational structure of the Finnish MSP. You already, in the introduction speech, you mentioned that we have this Maritime Spatial Plan 2030. And it's important to acknowledge that it actually consists of 3 maritime spatial plans in the 3 planning areas. For some reason, the map presentation on the right-hand side doesn't work right now, so it's hard. It doesn't reflect what I'm saying, but still, there are 3 planning areas and 3 maritime spatial plans. And this planning and this plan has been done in collaboration with 8 coastal regional councils. And each coastal regional council have an assembly that kind of approved separately the plan for their area. And this was done by December 2020, meaning that at this point our plan is in force. And most of the MSP area, that is the territorial waters, is also covered by the land use plans done by regional councils and municipals. But before MSP, we didn't have an instrument. These land use plans, they didn't cover all the maritime sectors, or if they covered some sectors, those weren't really in the active role in land use planning. Next slide, please. Yes, with this picture, I want to kind of underline the kind of hierarchy of the planning that covers the sea area in Finland. First, we have this maritime spatial planning. It covers both territorial waters and EEZ. And these regional councils, 8 coastal regional councils, are responsible for this strategic plan. So it's strategic by nature. And then we have the regional land use plans that covers the territorial waters. And responsible authorities also regional councils. And these plans are legally guiding. So it's very important to acknowledge that in Finland, the responsibility to kind of do the maritime spatial planning is done by in a regional level, not in a national level, not done by a national agency, for example. That is the case in many countries, but it's done in a regional level. And the same planners that are responsible for this MSP are also responsible for drafting and approving the regional land use plans. So the same persons, they do the strategic planning and they do the legally guiding land use planning. And then we have more detailed planning in the municipal level, local master plans that cover also the territorial waters, and these are also legally guiding. Next slide, please. I wanted to show you this infograph. It kind of describes the situation how the maritime spatial plan covers the whole sea area, starting from the shoreline until the end of the EEZ to the neighboring country. And in the green, you can see that there are regional and municipal legally guiding and legally binding plans that cover the territorial sea area. But also we overlap with the marine strategy that covers the whole sea area and the river basin management plan. So we have to collaborate also with the authorities and stakeholders that are involved in this marine strategy framework directive and then water framework directive work in Finland. Next slide, please. So I just wanted you to see the Finnish planning system comparing to Swedish planning system, just to show that these kind of management and authority and organizational structures and responsibilities, they differ between countries. In Finland, MSP is done in the regional level, whereas in Sweden, it's done in a national level. We start from the shoreline, they don't start the shoreline. Our MSP is strategic. In Sweden, it's guiding, but non-binding. And in Finland, we have regional and municipal planning that are legally binding. But in Sweden, the municipal planning is also guiding and non-binding. So I know that they have ways of dealing with land sea interactions and integrated coastal zone management in Sweden. But in Finland, I'm able to speak only on behalf of Finland. Here, it's kind of built inside our planning, land use planning system, that we have to consider these aspects in all levels of planning. This is just something I wanted to show you. So I wrote down a long text about the nature of the maritime spatial plan in Finland in this slide. I won't read it through, but just underline a couple of things. Well, the plan has 2 main objectives that are first to support the sustainable growth and sustainable use of the marine resources. And then second one is to support the good status of the marine environment. And although our plan is not legally guiding or legally binding, it is a tool for spatial planning. And it supports especially the regional land use planning and regional development, as you can understand, because they are the same planners, the same tables where you ponder these things. And it's linked to any national, regional, or sectoral policy guidelines and strategies we have in Finland. And I think that this is why it is so important to have a strong collaboration process with maritime stakeholders, authorities, and experts. We are and have been truly after the commitment to the plan, and I could say that after the psychological ownership experience towards the plan. So the plan looks to the future, and I'd say it's a real challenge because we live in this day, and to look upon 10 years or 30 years, it's a real challenge to understand and predict the needs of the marine sectors and marine environment. So we saw it very important to apply the ecosystem-based approach planning. So I won't go into that, but there is a link to our report. It's in English if you want to get familiar with it. The next one, please. So here's our cooperation structure in a nutshell. In my slides, I will talk about the cooperation and collaboration and co-creation. I use these terms very loosely, forgive me doing that, but this is our cooperation structure in a nutshell. In practice, we have a MSP coordination group that consists of altogether 16 maritime spatial planners, 5 GICS experts, and the coordinator, that is me. And in addition to that group, we have 9 professional PR persons. We have used a bunch of consultants. We have engaged researchers and MSP-related projects. Then we have a national level MSP cooperation group, including ministries and agencies, for example. And then what I'm very proud of is kind of the MSP cooperation network that is open to anyone. If you go our internet pages, there's a link to, and you can sign yourselves into our network, and then you will get any invitations there is to any activities, any workshops we arrange. So we have some 400 participants from local to national level stakeholders. Next slide, please. Very shortly about our cooperation process, how we built it up, so to say. We conducted a stakeholder salience analysis. Won't go into that, but we have this understanding that whoever the plan affects on has possibility to join our work and say what they have and what they want to say. And then also it was very important phase to understand how to approach these different stakeholders, who to inform, who to consult, who to engage. And the collaboration part is actually with the maritime stakeholders, whether local, regional or level or national level stakeholder. And then we had an interaction plan, internal, and then the public one, the external one. And then the co-creation is the main thing in this cooperation process, the co-creation of knowledge. I will go into that into next slides. We had formal consultations, and we see the transboundary cooperation and consultation very important in our MSP. And then I also listed the basic theories of what we have used to set up our cooperation process. Won't go into those. Next slide, please. Shortly, this is the cooperation process I'm talking about, kind of time frame from 2016 to 2020. I just want to highlight that we started the collaboration with stakeholders in the early 2016, when we haven't done anything, but we asked stakeholders how to plan. Please tell us, how do you see that is, what is the relevant way of planning? And then we actually followed quite nicely what they told us. And the most active phase was in 2019, 2020. Maybe let's take another slide, next slide, please, because here is the most intensive phase, the scenario phase, the vision phase we had with stakeholders. And now I'm talking about the co-creation process that covers both scenario work and the vision work. So we had collaborative planning with maritime stakeholders. In the scenario phase, we had some 350 stakeholders. In the vision phase, we had some 380 maritime stakeholders, and this is a lot comparing to the Finnish population. This is actually a really big network we could utilize. And for some reason, we managed to have even more participants towards the end of the co-creation process. The whole process took a little bit more than 1 year. So as you know, usually it goes so that people are interested in engaging themselves and their resources to your work first in the first phase, but then they get bored and they think that this doesn't matter and I can't make any difference. So they won't engage anymore. But for some reason, we managed to have even more stakeholders in the last phase. In the scenario phase, together with the stakeholders, we actually examined the possible futures of maritime sectors in relation to these key change factors I have listed here. It was a very important phase for us. Stakeholders, they had to let it loose in a way, in a positive manner, and ponder even the worst possible scenarios for their sector. And then we moved towards the vision phase, where the stakeholders kind of chose the future they wanted, and they built a shared vision and sector-specific visions and roadmaps, the steps to reach that vision phase. Next slide, please. This slide and the picture on the right-hand side is from our co-creation process and the vision phase, actually. And this is just an example of the working method we used in our workshops. And this 3D diagram is not place-specific, but it kind of demonstrates the status of the marine energy sector in 2030. And all the information there is in that picture and then written in our digital plan was told by maritime stakeholders in the workshops. And as you know, of course, if you think about it, we have planners and we have experts and we have officials, and they could tell us most of the information there is. But the reason that we wanted maritime sector stakeholders to tell this to us was that we wanted them to build social trust towards the planners and psychological ownership towards the plan. And I think that by colliding the stakeholders with each other, and also I think with the planners, stakeholders colliding with the planners, we build social capital and shared understanding of socio-ecological systems. And I think that it's important to acknowledge that not only stakeholders, but also our planners developed a more systematic kind of comprehension of the values provided by ecosystems and humans' role therein, so to say. So this was very practical way of adopting the EBA, the ecosystem-based approach in planning and understanding land-sea connections. Very bottom-up, hands-on maritime spatial planning approach, I'd say. What I also want to underline here is that what was important for us, that we didn't put any maritime sectors in order of importance based on, for example, national economies. Instead, it is stated in our plan, I will read it out loud, that the Maritime Spatial Plan identifies the needs of the marine environment and the well-being of maritime actors equally without placing them in an order of importance. The sectors examined have different societal and community values, which the plan seeks to foster. And because this was our principle, it was easier to approach stakeholders, it was easier to engage them, make them all visible during our planning. Next slide, please. Then I want to give you an example of the industrial ports during our co-creation process. In planning and in plan, we, and by we, I mean not only planners, but also maritime stakeholders, we acknowledge that ports are very essential land-sea action hubs, so to say. And they have very important role as regards regional development and blue growth. And so in our co-creation process, the ports were examined as a part of the maritime logistics. During the vision phase, we conducted a SWOT analysis and then examined the possible conflicts and synergies. And it was very clear for us that the main worries, the main conflicts arise from the need to dredging and dumping and from the management of emissions. So no news now, so to say. But these stakeholders that represented ports and maritime logistics, they had a shared understanding with other maritime stakeholders of the needed steps towards the Vision 2030 that is actually on the 3D picture on the left-hand side. In the plan, we have map markings that identify the 10T ports and also other regionally important ports. But I will, next slide please, so I will explain in more detail what we did after we identified the main issue, the main conflict there is as regards the ports. Because, as I mentioned earlier, we have this planning hierarchy, and there are only certain aspects that the MSP can cover, but this is something we can do. So because there's pressure on dredging and dumping, we conducted a survey where we identified the future dredging needs on ports and also on the main fairway areas. And you can see a map on the left-hand side. It's in Finnish. I'm sorry about that. So we checked the needed areas and needed volumes in the nearby future. And then we had this exclusion analysis to identify most suitable dumping places as regards the marine environment and sociocultural aspects. And I have listed here some of the indicators where we set, and we set a buffer zone for these, starting from 100 meters to 1 kilometer, and then checked the most suitable dumping places in the sea area. And we took note also on cost efficiency things, so that the distance to port didn't extend over 20 kilometers, and also ecological values, so that the sea depth started from the 3 meters, meaning that the most shallow and ecologically valuable marine areas are not included in this approach. And then we had some expert analysis on which are the most suitable places, and we identified 3 places on each port for the future dumping needs. And we have a report on that, but it's in Finnish, unfortunately in Finnish. But this is something, the level we can do in MSP. Then an example of the co-creation process challenge I want to tell you is the collaboration with fishers, because this was a very new stakeholder group for our planners. During the planning process, it was really easy to reach the regional and national level actors. They're used to collaborate, they're used to cooperate and meet authorities. And this, in our land use planning, this is very invisible sector. Now they turn to be very visible. But it was a challenge throughout the planning process to understand how we can support the sector's well-being. And after we did an impact assessment for our plan, it showed that actually we couldn't support the development vision of the fishing sector. There's a picture on the right-hand side. It's really easy to interpret, even though you can't read it. But in the inner circle is the situation without the plan, and outer circle is the situation where the plan is in force, and all the steps we identified during the vision work have happened. So that is the situation, and we couldn't support. It seems to be so that we can't support the fisher, especially the small-scale coastal fishing, for some reason. Well, we had a case study to engage also local fishermen. We pondered whether it's important, and we measured the motivation and trust levels in the beginning of the MSP collaboration and after the plan was approved. And for some reason, against the hypothesis we had, the levels of trust or motivation were not higher after the cooperation process. Something went wrong, so to say. So I think there's a need to go even more deeper, even more bottom up, to have at least regional level value chain approach and then find the connections to other maritime sectors in even more detailed manner, I'd say. But this was a challenge. Next. And another challenge was how to gather and value local knowledge. We had also had a case study in Satakunta region. It's actually where I am sitting at this point. We collected local level knowledge of meaningful places and processes. We had 4 categories, whether it's the meaningful leisure time and recreation, meaningful for emotions or livelihood, or natural and cultural values. And we also examined the possible conflicting places. And then we interpreted the data so that where it happens, the spatial aspects, the temporal aspects, the reasons for that. But then the most important question planning-wise is that what is needed to maintain it, to mitigate the conflict. And this is something we had a case study, but this is something we have to do along the coast during our second planning process, just as an example. Next slide, please. Well, I wanted to give you an overview on our communication information efforts we did during our planning process to reach, for example, authorities and organizations. We published a MSP newsletter just last December. And I know that, Larissa, you are online and you've also wrote to our newsletter. I hope you have received your printed one. It's also in the digital form. Then we had story maps to inform wider public of the current situation. And then we conducted some Vision 2030 videos for wider public to show the vision image for the 2030 for wider public. Next slide, please. Finally, I will go through our plan, just a couple of map markings, so to say, so to highlight the importance of the coastal zone. Our plan is only in the digital form in the address merialusuunnitelma.fi. It's in Finnish, it means Maritime Spatial Plan. It consists of 5 parts, and you can find our plan map from the section that is highlighted in the blue color in this kind of list of 5 aspects, and all the content I explained to you earlier you can find from our digital plan. And next slide, please. Then a closer look at the plan. On the left-hand side, you can see that the map markings overlap each other. It is a choice we made, and you can't actually kind of go into our plan and just look upon one maritime sector, but you always have to look all maritime sectors at the same time. And this was our choice. It is our intention to show that the potential places for different sectors may be exactly the same places with other maritime sectors. Different actors have interest towards the same places, and the interest may collide, or there might be some synergies to cultivate. So this is how we built our map. And on the right-hand side, you can see the zoning we did. It differs from the zoning that other countries do. I think they have different kind of principle behind the zoning, but our zoning means that we have this inner archipelago, then we have outer archipelago, and then open sea area. And the reason for that is that we want to highlight especially the coastal zone, where we have high natural values and high human pressure. And I have listed all those aspects that have to be taken into account when doing more detailed planning in the area. And the classification and the identification of zones based on classification made under water management. So next slide, please. I'm reaching the end of my presentation. I want to show you the archipelago map marking. I do not know any other country with this kind of map marking. First, we have the current state. We have this report from the year 2006, that is Sustainable Coasts, Finnish Coastal Zone Strategy. And then we have this YKR data report that is based on socioeconomic facts that consider the people living in the coastal area. Then we have a plan map where we have this archipelago map marking. And I want to highlight that it means actually the functional archipelago, the ways to support the functions and the vitality of the archipelago. And also we have this functional connection map marking and tourism recreational connection map marking that support the vitality of the archipelago and the coastal area. And the impact assessment, this was very important part. We also examined the well-being and the development of archipelago areas in relation to all marine sectors development visions, how they support the vitality of the archipelago. And as you can understand easily, it's the land-sea interaction and the coastal socio-ecological systems that I mentioned before in the co-creation process are very vital for this archipelago area. So just as an example, I wanted to list some challenges of the collaborative process because it takes a lot of resources, I'd say. We have a long coast, we have regional councils, they have different development visions, they have different way of doing land use planning. to deal with the maritime sectors, it was a real challenge to do this together. And then there's political decision making, because actually, if you talk about the Assembly of the Coastal Regional Council, it means local level politicians. This was our first plan, our first planning round. Maybe they didn't actually know what it means, because we still don't know what it means when we have the first plan in force. But in the future, I see that there might be increased political pressure. And we will maybe talk about different aspects that we talked during our first round. So the compromises are essential. And when you collaborate, you have to have room for negotiation. If there's no room for negotiation, I don't see how collaboration could happen. In many cases, the sector policies rule over MSP. Of course, this is a strategic plan. This is a case, for example, in the case of the coastal fisherman, and also the external factors that have an effect on certain maritime sectors. As an example, I wrote down that such as high number of seals and great cormorants that have negative effect on small-scale coastal fishing, there's nothing we can do. Just bring it to the fore and then give it a platform and discuss. That is all we can do. And as I mentioned before, it's a challenge to look up the future. And most definitely, there's a need to reach more locals and go even more bottom up during our next planning round. And then the final slide, it just contains the internet pages. We have, please go and search. You can find all the content there is. Thank you, many thank you for giving me this time to give a presentation.